Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Christopher, this is aartadventure, and today is day 8, I believe, day 8 of Inktober 2019 with the prompt word Frail. I thought I would do a real-time tutorial today. I don't think I've ever done one of those before, and I like doing firsts for my channel. So a while back I painted or drew in color pencils these lovely rainbow roses. I'm quite happy with how they turned out, especially the one with my Caran d'Ache luminance pencils. And one of my viewers asked if I would do a real-time tutorial. So I thought today could be the perfect opportunity for that. I've drawn roses a few different times. I'm not an expert at them, but I enjoy drawing them. So I thought I would share with you tips and tricks that I know. So, first of all, you are going to need some paper. I'm just going to use this B Company paper mixed media sketchbook, but you can just use copy paper or printer paper. And I am left-handed, so I'm going to spin it upside down and back to front and open it Japanese style. You're also going to need a pencil, and that's it. I'm going to use these Tritone color pencils because I find that they're really fun to sketch with. I've been really enjoying them. So I think I'll start with this pink one, and I'll also select this greenish one, and also this stormy color one, and also this one. So those, okay, one more yellowy one. So those ones are the ones that I'll probably use. Really, you just need one pencil. Okay, so and I like going over the top, that's me. And you'll also need a reference photo of a rose to start off with. Once you get some practice in, you'll be able to start drawing roses just from your mind's eye or from your imagination, hopefully. But definitely to start off with, I really recommend getting some reference photos. So use something like Pixabay or Unsplash or one of those free websites that are non-copyright if you think you might be trying to sell that work. Otherwise, just if it's just for practice, just take a reference from anywhere. What else do I want to say? So this will probably take some time if you're doing Inktober. Please, start drawing away and doing your own thing, or, get out these materials and start drawing roses along with me. And if you just enjoy having something on in the background, that's cool too. Thank you so much for everyone who's been coming by my channel, supporting, subscribing, all of that sort of stuff. If you are new, welcome. Feel free to click subscribe. I would love it for you to become an official art adventurer. Okay, so without further ado, let's just get on with the show. So I want a nice sharp pencil to start off with. So I'm going to sharpen that and make a mess on my nice clean paper. Okay. And it doesn't even really need to be a sharp pencil. And I also recommend that you don't even bother with an eraser for these just rough initial starting sketches. Let's just get the first one out of the way, get some warm up going on, right? So I'm going to use a reference, but only loosely use it. And I'll show you how I approach this drawing of a rose. First of all, think about where you want your rose. I want my rose to be kind of here for the flower and then a stem coming down. So I'm just going to draw a loose kind of circle shape where I want the rose to be. Just do that really lightly, and so I'm not even sure it'll show up on camera. And then a line for where you would like the stem to go. Roses tend to have quite strong and straight stems. I mean, there's such variety with roses, so you're going to see a lot of difference out there, but in general, that's what you're going to see. Now I'm going to start drawing a little bit darker and also change my camera setup real quickly so that you'll be able to see what I'm doing for these initial lines. Okay, so hopefully that's not so whitewashed now, and maybe you're able to see some very faint lines here. That's how faint you should draw them, but so that you can follow along with me for this tutorial, I'm going to draw darker. I'm gonna, I think, choose a darker color even, and show that initial line more clearly. This one. Okay, I think that shows up. So there's my circle, there's my stem, and then you want to think about where your center part is for the rose. It'll probably look odd if you actually it will look odd if you're doing a kind of side view like this and you put the center of the rose right in the center of the circle, right? So it's going to be up towards the top and maybe slightly off center a little bit. So I'm going to put mine here. And then I'm just going to start to put in those initial first petals. And I do this just by kind of doing some rough sort of ovally shapes with the idea that there's going to be small tight petals in the center and then slightly larger petals surrounding that. And these are going to start to take more of an abstract shape. Just try to focus on the shapes for each petal. Each one should be separate when you're studying it. And keep looking at your reference for each petal and going back and forth. So I have this first little initial few petals in here, then a slightly larger one surrounding that, then a larger one behind that, and you just keep going, taking each petal one at a time. If you're really unsure, and trust me, I used to take so long to draw just simple shapes like these, even if I'm not really paying that much attention to the reference itself. So if you are unsure, try to just remember it's a loose sketch. You can make mistakes. It's just a warm-up. You're going to be able to draw another one if it doesn't work. And if you're really unsure, maybe draw a grid and use an app to put a grid over your picture, or if you've printed out your reference, draw a grid over that. So I just keep going and adding each petal as I see it for the reference, taking each one at a time. And you'll see that the petals interlink with each other, but just try to focus on each one separately and take it one petal at a time. When you get to the outside perimeter, you'll see that the petals don't form in a perfect circle. Some of them are inside of the circle shape that you loosely drew. Some of them go outside of that. That's fine. That was just a guide for you to be able to get an idea of where the petals should all end up. But you won't obviously just have a circle at the end. So this pencil that I'm using is a Tritone Pencil in the color Evening Storm. It's a lovely color, colors, because it's a tritone, it has three, which has blue, gray, and red all mixed in together. So that's why you're seeing a variety of colors. It just keeps it fun for me, other than just, using a graphite pencil, but that's totally fine if you're just using a graphite pencil. I sketch with graphite pencils all of the time. And so you'll start to see that, at least for a traditional rose, that often the petals in the beginning, close to the center, have a more kind of oval and round sort of shape to them. And then as you get further towards the edges, you'll start to see more kind of triangular shapes, and corners begin to arise. As the petals grow out, they will often fold over or just have a more angular shape to them as they're maturing. And so you'll also see that some of them greatly break that circle sort of shape. Again, it was just a guide for you to get a sense of where to put things. So this is my first rose flower of the day done. Is it perfect? No. Is it something that I'm happy with as a warm-up sketch? Yeah, and I think it looks pretty enough. And of course, I still haven't finished because I have to complete the stem and the leaves. So for that, I'm going to switch colors. I have a little leaf down here and the hint of one down here, but I can't actually see from this angle where the flower connects to the stem. So that's all that I need to draw. The stems of roses, although fairly straight, will have a little bit of movement to them and a little bit of angular bumps here and there. If you want to be a super traditionalist, you can also add little sharp triangles for the thorns. My reference photo only has one, but I'll just throw in 3, so feel free to break your reference. And then I see a few different leaves. They're going to be just rough oval sort of shapes. They don't all come off from the stem in my reference. The stem and the attachment point from the stem is hidden from the viewer's eyes in this reference. And so I'll just draw the leaves on top. I could erase that out if I had a graphite pencil. I'm not sure. I can sort of erase a little bit with these pencils, but they're not designed. They're proper color pencils. They're not really designed for erasing. And then one big leaf that goes off the page here. And then some veins. Many rose plants will have a center vein, a one dominant center vein, and that's quite prominent. And then you'll also have veins that come off kind of in alternating V shapes a lot of the time, not always, but that's what it is in this reference, so I'm just putting those in. But you can also just make them up like I did with this drawing here. I actually didn't even pay close attention to the references for the veins. I just put them in wherever I felt like, although I did kind of go with center veins. And then you want to go back and add a little bit of angularness to the leaves. They will have these kind of sharp triangular bump bits. And so that's pretty easy. You just add little bumps as you're drawing down. Start at the top if that's easier for you, or start at the base. So I just did that one from the top. I'll do this one from the base. So it's kind of like lift up, in, lift up, in, lift up, in, lift up, in. And I usually find it easier to kind of go in that direction in my mind. But once you get used to it, you can also just go in the other direction and try not to make it too uniform. I've probably made that one a little bit too uniform. And again, just try to focus on the reference itself. Sometimes you'll see more of those bumps than on other times. And then I'm just going to go back and define those veins. And then my quick sketch for this rose, I think, is done. So that's my first drawing of a rose, and I could then color that in or spend some time to refine these edges and shapes or whatever I want to do. But for me, I'm just going to leave it at that and move on to a second rose. For this second rose, I'm going to do the same sort of angle and type of rose. I'm using a similar reference, and I'm just going to see if I've improved or not, or if I just like the idea of them sitting together. In my reference, they're separate, but I'm going to have this rose sit in front of this one. And to do that in a composition, just start off with the same idea. So you draw a circle, but place your circle so that the rose in front is going to overlap the rose behind. And so this will look great if you do 2 or 3 of the roses together. One rose by itself is fine too if you had it maybe in the center of the page. Okay, so I have my circular shape there, and then I have my stem again. Okay, and maybe if you just watched this first rose, then this is the time to go grab or hit pause, go grab your materials, and now draw along with me. If you did that and you're back, we've now got our circle and we've now got our loose stem. All right, for this one, I'm going to have the center of the rose right up at the top. I'm looking at my reference. I have a tiny little petal in here and then some others looping very closely towards that. And then, just like with the first one, I'm starting to have some larger petals surrounding that. But in this case, many of the petals are hidden by these petals in the front. So I don't keep drawing when I get to one of these petals. And I just keep looking back at my reference, seeing where those petals would lie, and correcting any mistakes as I'm going along. but not being too precious about it, like very loosely. Like I'm not doing this to exact proportions by any means. This one is even quite a trickier rose than the first one in terms of the reference. So it's going to look a little bit odder, I think. And I might want to go back and even change some of those things as I'm seeing the rose develop. And then I have a large petal here that's in 2 sections. And it's a bit weird actually drawing and talking at the same time. More than a little bit weird, it's quite strange indeed. So I'm finding it tricky to concentrate and draw accurately and talk to you. I hope that you're understanding me as I'm going along. But I've also realized I've gone probably way too far out of the circle for this petal. So I'm just going to rein that back in a little bit and lightly erase a bit, but not worry too much. And so this one's ended up quite a little bit more wonky than the first one, but that's okay. And maybe I can fix that a little bit right now. And then time for the stem, and I've got a leaf that this time attaches at the front, then my oval shape for it. Got a couple of leaves off the rose itself again, then some other leaves that poke out behind, like that, and like that. And then one here. Okay, so then I just need to fill in those details. So doing that kind of rough and bumpy, loose sort of approach again, and putting in the stems, the angled lines. And then this leaf is actually behind this stem here. And strangely, I feel like this rose didn't turn out as well as this rose. That sometimes happens when you sketch. Don't be dismayed if, you don't feel like you're not instantly improving. It can take, it usually takes weeks to months of really quite regular daily, if not every second day practice for most artists to feel like they've kind of leveled up. And they might not even then notice it. It'll only be when they go back and look at things that they've drawn way back ago and then see the improvement. And then even then, I see often artists that draw all of the time, every day, will still wake up each day and their very first drawings of the day when they're warming up are things that they're not happy with, that they just feel like has turned into a bit of a mess. So all of that is totally normal. What matters is that you're practicing when you have the time to practice, that you're drawing things that you enjoy drawing, that you're having fun with it. It's art. It's not meant to be something that's a total chore and horrible to experience. It's not meant to be something that you're enjoying doing and that you're having the joy of creating. So here we have 2 different roses on side view. Let's draw a couple of top view. So I need a new page and some new references. Okay, so here I'm going to draw directly top view down a couple of rose heads that are fully in bloom. And so this time I just need a few circles. I'm going to draw one here, one here overlapping, and then one here. So I'm going to have 3 different roses. Okay, for the first one, and for many of them, again, even though you're looking top down, it's probably not going to be so interesting if you do a direct top view with the center of the rose right in the center of your circle. So I'm using a reference where it's a top view sort of angle, or a slightly angled top view. What do I want to say there? It's sort of from the top, but not directly from the top. And so my center of the flower is here. And then I have a lot of very tight oval-shaped petals here at first, so many of them that I'm not going to draw them completely accurately. And then a number of petals that start to tightly wrap around that. And again, I'm looking closely at my reference during this stage, and then the petals are beginning to get a little larger and a little looser. And then there's a big one here, goes out to there, and this wraps down here. Then I have a big petal down at the end here, and then some large kind of angular ones off to the side. There we go, there's my first one. Could be tidied up a little bit, but that's okay. And then I've got another here. I'm going to use a slightly different reference for that, and that's the fun of drawing. You can take a whole bunch of different references and then put them together, either in your mind's eye or using, printing them out and then using scissors and glue and tape to arrange them how you like, or if you're comfortable with digital tools, piecing them together in a program like Photoshop and then just layering them on top of each other. And so then I have a few tight petals on this one here. And then once again, the petals begin to get larger and looser. But you'll see in a second that this one is possibly a different species because the outermost petals still stay quite sort of roundish to some, or some of them do anyway. There's some up the top here that are a bit more angular, but then we've got some very loose sort of more organic, traditional sort of flowery shapes, I guess, over here. And so that is my last large petal for this one. And then finally, we have a big rose here. Lots of complex petals in the center, so I'm going pretty quick and I'm not paying attention to all of them. I'm not doing it as a realistic, complete piece. I'm just kind of getting a sense of what the flower is by choosing the petals that stand out to me as I'm drawing and talking, and trying to keep my circle in mind. It looks like I've moved that a little bit, so I'm going to have to rearrange it on the fly. And then lots of overlapping, and then we're starting to get to some of those larger petals there. And then finally, some of the really large petals getting closer to the edge. So these are my three messy, but it was fun to draw roses here. Now, if I was doing a serious piece, I would take either more time and care to make sure that I'm drawing each individual petal as I go, and definitely if you're not used to drawing roses, you should be taking more time, or if you're just not used to drawing in general, just slow it down, look at each one bit by bit, but feel free to make alterations and add some petals. They're living organic things. If you change things around a little bit, no one's going to really notice at all. But if you want to be completely precise, like I suggested before, draw a grid and use a grid over your reference, and then just take it one square at a time using that grid method. Okay, so here are my top view roses, here are my side view roses, but there are so many different other kinds of roses, and before I move on to my time lapse and do a more serious one, I'm going to draw some younger roses, the kind of the budding stage. So I need some more references for those. Okay, so hopefully you can see here that I am now using a reference on my phone of a rosebud. I just did a Google search of rosebud, and this is one of the first ones that popped up, and I probably think it's a copyright one, but I know that I'm never going to try to sell this image, and it's not going to be exact anyway. So we can see here that things are quite a bit different. It's kind of like a bell shape, and then the stem, if it's a side view anyway, and that's pretty typical. So that's what I'm going to start off with drawing. That's a great approach to drawing in general. Start off with loose outer shapes and then work your way inwards. So I've got a kind of teardrop or bell shape here, yeah, and then a straight line once again for the stem. Put a little bit of a curve to it, and then it bulbs up at the top a little bit. Now I can go in and put in my details. It doesn't need to be the same colors by any means, and so I see the center point is an important location, so I'm going to put that in as a dot. I could even start to think about the next outer big shapes if I wanted to, but I'm happy enough with just that. I can see a couple of very tiny petals in the center, then some smaller, closer petals around that. Then I see this big outside petal shape, and it has a few folds to it. I have one here, then one here, and then finally this looped over petal here that then becomes crinkly and folds in. And then I would say my rosebud is pretty much done. I have to move on to the leaves, or I don't have to, but I want to. So I see a leaf that comes out here, it curls around, and these leaves are quite unusual. I'm not sure if it's because it's a younger budding flower and the leaves are still developing like the flower itself. I suspect that's the case, or it could just be that this is this species. And I also want to try and lighten this line here. I see a leaf here. It's got some spikiness to it and it folds over actually. But again, I'm not being too precious or too exact in trying to get it absolutely perfect. And then a larger leaf here. So you can see I'm really being quite loose with this, just having some fun. That's a great way to practice. You actually will improve a little bit, even if you're not trying to be absolutely exact, just by doing this over and over. And if it's not something that humans are really good at telling where there's errors, like for example a human face, you can't do this with a human face because it'll just all look wrong. But if it's something organic like a plant, even some animals, but I would say something more like a plant or an abstract form or a rock or a landscape, you can be a little bit off and it still works totally fine. So there's some darkness in there. And then we are done. I actually want to add a couple of thorns in here just to put some interest. So like I said, it's your drawing. You can change things around as you like and make things quite different. And then if you're really happy with that, especially if you drew lightly, of course you can start to shade and color. For example, if I wanted to just color this very, very quickly, I could shake a couple of colors that are darker tones. Just do some cross hatching shading in the darker areas. And layer that with the kind of darker colors. And then move into some of the softer color tones. And again, I could keep on hatching or color in, and I'm just trying out new things here because it's a sketch, so I don't really mind if things go wrong. I want some darker shadow areas in these spots. Darker there, and quite dark there. And then I want some light areas. A lot of drawing and coloring comes down to lights and darks if you want things to look cool or have some power to them. So just focus more about where the lights are, where the darks are, and everything else will kind of fall into place, even if you are not using realistic colors like I'm not here, right? And so once I've done that, I could even take a liner pen. So I'll just grab a inking pen. Okay, so I just have a brush pen here because I feel like using that. And then once I have those outlines done, things are going to come together a lot more, even though it's just a quick and simple little sketch. Or I hope that's the case. We'll see. It's yet to be determined. And this is where you can, especially if you drew lightly, you can erase as you go or take more care with your inking lines. It's up to you and how much time you have to spend on a sketch, but I'm, just spending like half an hour to draw all of these as a kind of warm-up before I move on to my actual Inktober time-lapse for the day. Or I should say drawing or sketching out the real piece for the day. Okay, so there is my little rosebud. Is it a mess? Kind of, but I think it has a kind of charm to it, and I could definitely spend more time coloring it in and shading it and getting colors nice, even just going back over now that I've got the ink lines with the lightest of colors to blend could really help, or a couple of colors. So blending these together, for example, and then blending those together. But for me, I was just more focused on the sketch itself and having a bit of fun practicing drawing flowers. Okay, and so then the last thing is, can you draw these sorts of things on your own without any reference? That's a totally different challenge. It's a totally different ball game, but once you do it enough, you can get some practice, enough practice to try and attempt it. I don't think I've ever drawn a young bud on my own before without a reference to guide me. I haven't even drawn that many roses in general, to be honest, but I have drawn a couple from side view. I drew one the other day. Let me show you. Where is it? Here's one that I just did messily the other day when I was having my morning coffee. And is it kind of a mess? Yes, but I was able to get some forms put in. And again, the more you do something, the more it will come together. And since I have a sort of loose reference there, why not draw one from my mind's eye, or try to draw one with my mind's eye to go with it. So once again, I'm going to have a bell shape. I'll have this one sort of as a bit of an angle. From memory, most roses tend to grow up when they're young quite straight, so I don't know how realistic that is, but I don't mind. And then the stem, again, I'm going to angle it a little bit, but keep it mostly straight. And then I'm going to have a center point. This one can be here. So I need to sharpen my pencil a little bit. Okay, so then I have a couple of very, whoops, pencil broke, too sharp, very tight starting petals, and then looping around that, they get bigger. And again, sort of at an angle. I'm going to do this one in the opposite direction, so I'm going to have a large sort of petal here, a large sort of petal there, and one that wraps around here. And so this one curls around here. This one should have been more here. That's okay. I can either erase or not count that line if I'm getting more serious with it later. Then this one needs to be more at an angle. I'm going to have the petal folded more for this one for some fun and contrast. Okay, then I need some leaves. I'm going to put one here, maybe one here, one off to the side here, and it can curl around up there, and one can curl around up there. Then a couple of thorns. And it's done. Okay, so it's a little bit odd now that I'm looking back on it. I need more of a kind of bell shape here. So I'm going to change that. I'm gonna have this petal come around like that, this petal come around like that, and then this leaf up here. And how did I spot that right away? I just leant back a little bit and looked back from a distance, and if you go away and step back, or even just step back a few feet and then look at your drawing, you'll often spot errors. Or you could use a mirror and flip it so that you can have a look through the mirror, and you can also take a photograph or use computer editing software to see the mirror image, and then that will hopefully help you to spot some mistakes. And again, if you find that it just turns out a total mess, like I used to find, it's something that you need to practice a little bit more, bit by bit, and you might want to just stick with having a reference to look at for now and working from references. So I hope that that's helped. Here are some side view budding roses. Here's a few top view roses. Here are some side view mature roses. It took me about half an hour to draw all of them. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So maybe I was spending like 5 minutes a rose. Maybe you want to set a timer for yourself if you're wanting to also practice speed. If that stresses you out, take as long as you like. I know when I first started, it would have taken me like half an hour just to draw one of these roses, let alone 7 of them. Okay, so I hope that that tutorial has helped you a little bit. If not, I'm sorry, I'm new to it and doing the best that I can. And let's now move on to the speed paint section of this Inktober. Let's go on an art adventure. Blah. So thanks so much if you made it through the full tutorial, but now we're on to the actual piece for Inktober 2019, prompt day 8 Frail. I thought I would draw some roses, but kind of upside down, and I kind of make a mistake that's a happy accident for one of them, and it loses the top of its stem, so it looks like it's falling off its stem, and there's also some petals that are falling down. And I'm using, at first, Copic markers on Yupo paper, which is actually a plastic. I've been using it on a few days for Inktober, so I'll put some cards up so you can check it out if you missed them. And I'm also using the black acrylic ink that I received in the ArtSnacks box for this month. I've been curious to see how Copic markers would perform on Yupo for quite some time, and I haven't really seen artists on YouTube using it. Probably for good reason, because I quickly decide that I don't like the effect very much. It ends up, as expected, being kind of streaky because it's plastic, and giving a softer look, almost like watercolors, maybe watercolors mixed with inks, and it also doesn't dry very quickly, so you're able to blend the colors into each other, but in a sort of streaky way. And personally for me, the thing that I really love about Copics, well, there's a bunch of things I really love about Copics, but one of the things that I love about Copics and why I'll grab for them is that when you use them on Bristol paper or many smooth papers, they blend so smoothly and so seamlessly and without streaks. So if I'm going to be using them, that's the sort of thing that I want to probably be using them for. And if I want a more painterly, watercolory sort of look, I guess I'll just use watercolors or inks, right? I still enjoy the process to some degree, but I don't see myself doing it again. If you look carefully, you can see me blending the colors into each other. The tips of the markers will get discolored while you're doing that, but you just have a scrap piece of paper next to you and then rub it a little bit, and the flow of the ink through the nib will reset that marker back to new, thankfully, so it won't be ruined. I also found that you need to use quite a strong color variation to get any sort of visible effect on Yupo. So for example, I had to use really dark reds and also pair that with very light pinks, and even I had to also switch to using some purple to try to get some of the contrast showing. And for the stems and the leaves, I needed to use a very yellowish yellow-green and then some very deep greens as well as the midtones, whereas normally I would choose 3 colors that sit really quite close to each other to do the blending. Here's the acrylic ink from Sennelier that I received in the Art Snacks box. It's a really lovely ink, and I hope that I'll be able to get my hands on some more of those inks of some different colors in the future. But for now, I have the black, and so with many inks, they're very concentrated and you don't need very much. A wet brush or a little bit of water and a tiny bit of ink will go a long way. In some sections of the background, I wet the Yupo first, the plastic first, and then I spread the ink onto it, and then in other sections I'm using the ink in full concentration. I'm finding that the Copic markers are drying quite well by this stage, but I'm still trying to be careful not to rub too much on it, because Yupo really does take a long time to dry, days to weeks. And I'm also finding that the acrylic ink, which would normally dry very, very quickly on normal paper, is also staying quite wet for quite some time. So I need to be very careful with that too. And I also work right to left because I'm left-handed. So if you're right-handed, I would recommend the opposite, working from left to right. I'm also very mindful to leave everything to dry after I get that background coat done. There's some sections right on the edge where the ink just won't stick to. It could possibly have to do with erasing after I put my sketch down, but sometimes I just find that the treated coated surface of the Yupo is a little bit uneven and it just doesn't work so great. The final item that I'm using, and I think I forgot to mention, is my Pentel pocket brush. Mine is a kind of soft purple color because in Japan you can get different colored ones, not just the black. And I'm finding that is pretty much so far the only inking pen that I've found that will stick onto Yupo and stay jet black. So yay for that. I think it is an India ink inside that pen, I'm not sure. And then I'm just edging everything, and that's it for this piece. The roses are frail. The petals are falling apart, they're maybe being knocked over, a vase on the table maybe has been knocked over, and they're in that fragile, frail moment of falling apart. So I hope that you've enjoyed both the tutorial and my experiment of Copic markers on Yupo paper. If you did, please feel free to give it a like, and if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I look forward to hearing from you in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for your support over these past few days while I'm going crazy. It's really been the thing that's keeping me to keep going with Inktober. Thank you so much, but I think I will take a day or two off this week so that I don't go completely insane. I'll still draw, just not make a video. Anyway, I'll see you guys soon for another art adventure. Take care.